Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. This is Bobbie Reagan. I wanted to let you know that we're actually recording this call so we can share it out afterwards. So I love the title of this webinar, Supporting High School Success Through Board Leadership. Our focus today will be on the implementation of Measure 98 and your role as school board members in ensuring that students graduate from high school and are fully prepared for college and career. I'm Bobbie Reagan, a former longtime member of the Portland School Board and a former longtime member of the Oregon School Boards Association. I worked on the Measure 98 campaign and was thrilled when OSBA endorsed the measure.
And I'm Parasa Chanramy. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager at Stand for Children. I've been with the organization for 5 years, and I've worked to protect and fund the measure during the 2017 session with all of our coalition supporters and partners. And now I'm working to ensure that the measure is implemented well.
So what we're going to cover during today's webinar is the nuts and bolts of Measure 98, and then we're going to be looking at key opportunities and timelines for board members. We'll have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the forum. So in terms of key roles for board members, clearly there are 4 main roles. First is hiring and managing your superintendent, and then clearly trying to work as a leadership team. Second is creating and updating your district's policies. Third is developing a budget each year and prioritizing funds to support student success. And fourth is serving as a liaison to your community. So at the end of the day, that all adds up to student success. Your ultimate job is to put the leadership, policies, budget priorities, and partnerships in place to ensure your students graduate fully prepared for college and career. The reason your role is so critical is because, as a state, we aren't doing a very good job getting our kids across the finish line. For the 2016-17 school year, Oregon graduated only 76.7% of our students, leaving about a quarter of our kids behind. As you can see from this slide, we're clearly seeing huge achievement gaps still. The backers of Measure 98 did a tremendous amount of research looking at what might move the dial. They looked at best practices and what strategies would support the students we most often leave behind. Most importantly, the goal is to have this initiative funded outside of and in addition to the state school fund. The goal is to allow school districts to add or expand opportunities for students to get them to graduation ready for college and career. At the OSBA annual convention, we had the opportunity to offer 2 workshops on Measure 98 as well as a tabletop presentation. All were packed and well received. So we know school board members want to change the trajectory, and we also know that there are many questions around the role of school board members in Measure 98 implementation. Clearly, you don't want to be in the weeds in the discussion. That's not your role. But you can have a significant voice in how your district chooses to implement the measure. That's what we're going to discuss today. So Parasa is going to take you through a quick overview of the measure, and then we'll talk about implementation timelines and how you fit in.
Thank you, Bobbie. Before putting the measure together, our organization did a listening tour to learn more about what was working around the state. 3 major themes came up and eventually became the 3 pillars of Measure 98. Those are career technical education, college-level opportunities, and dropout prevention. So we're learning about what's working. The challenge is to bring these programs and systems to scale and sustain funding for them. All of our high school kids should have access to these opportunities. Let's start with career technical education. So in addition to our listening tour, we also visited a lot of different CTE programs around the state. We also looked at the data. As you can see, CTE is having a positive impact on helping students graduate. It's hands-on, it's relevant. CTE students across different races and ethnicities graduating at higher levels across our state. Next, I want to chat a little bit more about college-level opportunities. We also learned more about how these accelerated learning opportunities were helping students succeed and prepare for college. For example, Eastern Promise provides high school students with the opportunity to earn college credit in courses taught by high school teachers under the guidance of college faculty. So 96% of Eastern Promise students graduated from high school in 2014. College enrollment among Eastern Promise students was 14 percentage points higher than the state average, and college persistence rates for these students was 75% compared to the statewide average of 31%. Lastly, I'll touch on dropout prevention. We also saw that 8.5 summer transition programs, freshman success work, and extra supports were all helping students stay on track and graduate from high school. Not only did we see this in Oregon, we also looked to the research at the University of Chicago. And in their partnership with Chicago Public Schools, they learned that ninth grade is a make or break it year for students. Students who finish ninth grade on track are 4 times more likely to graduate on time. I also want to go over what happened during the 2017 legislative session. So there were some amendments made to the ballot measure, and the new law is under House Bill 2246. What you'll find is that now you have new flexibility for small and medium-sized school districts, and that's based on your allocation. So if you're a small district, you can choose to do one of the 3 pillars. If you're a medium-sized district, you can choose to do 2 of the 3 pillars. One of them must be career technical education. And for large districts, they must implement all 3 of the pillars. The other change that was made is now that 4-year plans are required instead of 2-year plans. So you'll be submitting 4-year plans every 2 years. With this first submission round, your plan must be a minimum of 3 years. The other change that was made was at up to 15% of your Measure 98 funding can be used in 8th grade, and at least one of the investments must align with the 3 pillars, 1 or more. And the other thing I wanted to touch on is that $170 million was allocated to Measure 98 for the 2017-19 biennium. This is only 50% of what was needed to be fully funded. And what that means to us is we need to go back in 2019 to ensure that we are able to fully fund this so that districts, school leaders, educators can continue to do this work that they've been wanting to do for our high school students. So with that, our work around implementation is going to be extremely critical, and we need to be able to showcase what kind of impact the measure is having on our students and our local communities. I'd also want to touch on what stayed intact. So you'll still need to expand or establish CTE, college level opportunities, dropout prevention strategies, supplement, not supplant. And lastly, the administrative cost percentages also stayed intact. So from now until June 30th of 2019, you can use up to 5% for administrative costs. Starting July 1st, 2019, you can use up to 4% on administrative costs. You'll also find more information about this in the Department of Education's FAQ, and we also included a link to their website at the end of this presentation. You might be wondering what you'll need to do in order to receive funding for year 2. Just so that everyone's on the same page, for year 1, districts simply needed to submit a request for funds. And then the other thing they had to do was to sign and submit a grant agreement and turn that into the Department of Ed. Now for year 2, you'll need to complete a self-assessment, and many districts have already done that. The next thing that you'll need to focus on is your multi-year plan, which is due at the end of March. And Bobbie's going to talk a little bit about that more. And lastly, you'll need to demonstrate in your plan how your school district has met or will meet the foundational eligibility requirements. Here's more on those foundational eligibility requirements. So as you know, before you build a house, you need a strong foundation. For Measure 98, this is the foundation. Regardless of the size of your district, what pillars you are prioritizing, all districts must focus on these areas. So the first one being around freshman success, making sure that your ninth grade teaching teams have sufficient time to meet, review data, plan, and apply interventions to support students. Next is focusing on reducing chronic absenteeism at all of your high schools in grades 9 through 12. A third is ensuring that we're improving equity in course taking. So what are we doing to remove biases, real or perceived, to remove these barriers as well, especially for students who have not traditionally taken these classes? And last, we want to make sure that students are taking the right courses to graduate on time, especially our English learners. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bobbie, who's going to take a deeper dive into what you should be working on over the next few months.
Thank you, Parasa. So last month, the majority of school districts completed their self-assessment, which is a baseline requirement to receive funds. It's important to know that there's no right or wrong answer here in terms of how school districts assessed how they are doing on the eligibility requirements. But for school board members, taking a look at your district self-assessment will help you understand how your staff rated where you stand today on the requirements and let you know where you need to put more effort or add more supports as a district. The self-assessment process asks districts to look at how they are doing on each of the eligibility requirements and their current capabilities as it relates to the three key areas of Measure 98, dropout prevention, access to college-level classes, and CTE opportunities. So when you look at your district self-assessment in each of these areas, there's 4 categories in terms of how they assess themselves. The first would be embedded. That means that this practice is so ingrained in our work that it is a distinguishing feature of the culture of our district, or you could look at it as your way of being. The second is practicing. This is a regular practice in our district or a way of doing business. The third category that they could mark is emerging, which means this practice is in its beginning stages in our districts. And the fourth way that districts could rate themselves is not yet, which means we have not begun this practice or we are planning to implement this practice in our district in the future. So I would say to you that if your district marked that you are emerging or not yet beginning a practice, you should pay attention to that because it's clearly an area of focus for you as a school board member. On the other hand, if your staff indicated that these practices are embedded in the way you do your work, and yet your high school graduation rate is 75% or is 75% or less for any of your subcategories of students, you might want to question that and see what's going on. It's also worth noting that for this process, the Oregon Department of Education recommended that school district staff do 3 things. First, they should establish a high school success team to complete and submit the self-assessment. Second, they should reflect on their first year successes, that's this school year, and areas for improvement. And finally, they should inform school board members and high school administrators of the timeline and next step. Your district self-assessment will have a lot of helpful information to you, and we strongly recommend that you ask for a copy of it. So moving to February of this month, the sad realization for many school board members as you start your budgeting process is that 80 to 90% of your budget is locked up in things like salaries, benefits, PERS payments, buses, utilities, and other non-negotiables. That doesn't leave a lot of discretionary funding for high priority investments. And so that is one of the great benefits of Measure 98. These are funds, again, that are outside of and in addition to your traditional state school fund budget. So this year you're going to want to include in your budget and staffing process a discussion around your Measure 98 investment. Here are some questions you should think about asking. How were Measure 98 funds used this year? Do we know if they've had any kind of a positive impact? What carryover will we have going into 2018 and 19? And how are we going to ensure that we use all of our full 2017-19 biennium funds by June of next year? You're also going to want to be thinking ahead. What are the plans for your district's 2018-19 allocation? Of the 3 Measure 98 areas of focus, where will you be investing the most and why? What new staff will be required to have the strongest impact on student success? Will you be adding counselors, freshman on track coaches, social workers, CTE educators, data specialists? That's your decision as a district. How can you use your Measure 98 funds during the summer to identify current 8th graders who might struggle as they enter high school? And how do you put supports under them? What kind of supports can you put in place starting on the first day of school in September to ensure these students succeed? And how is your district using your allocation of administrative dollars to help build capacity? As you think through these questions, our most important advice would be to ask for a board work session around Measure 98. Depending on your timing, you could ask your superintendent to give you a report, or you can invite members of your senior team, your high school principal, a high school counselor, CTE teachers, and others to share information on how your Measure 98 investment will boost your graduation rates. We actually recommend a second board work session to specifically talk through your district's multi-use plan. This is due on March 31st, which is only weeks away. For this work session, along with your internal team, including your high school principal or principals, counselor and CTE teachers, think about bringing in some community partners. If you're a small district, how can your ESD support your efforts? And by the way, if you're an ESD board member, you should look at Measure 98 as a golden opportunity for you to lean into your convener role. If you have multiple small school districts in your region, how can you help them get to an economy of scale in terms of student opportunities or purchasing power? You should also be looking at partnering with your community college to help your students access college credits. How would you be able to include culturally specific community-based organizations in the mix, as well as federally recognized tribes? All of these community partners are going to want to lean in to support your efforts. Many school districts, so you know, are putting together internal and external work groups to help them think through the opportunities around Measure 98. Can you ask some local business partners or trade groups to join your work group? For your multi-year plan, you're going to want to understand what practices are working and where added or expanded opportunities will make a difference. You're going to want to target CTE funds toward pathways that ultimately expose and prep students for high-demand, middle-income jobs. You're going to want to set a target for how many of your 9th graders in June of next year are on track to graduate with 6 credits or more. And as you offer more college-level courses, you're going to want to ensure that these are accessible to all students, not just some of them. We all know that if we push students to take higher-level courses and you provide the appropriate supports under them, most of our students will rise to the occasion. Most importantly, you're going to want to target resources to those students who have historically struggled to get to graduation. If you haven't looked recently at your district's state report card, please do so before your district submits its multi-year plan. How are your students of color doing? How are your poorest students doing? As you look at student mobility, which is those students who are moving in and out of your district, how are they faring? Are your boys doing as well as your girls? Ask directly, how will our Measure 98 plan specifically support our students who are struggling? Up to 15% of your Measure 98 dollars can be used in 8th grade. That could be to offer high school level classes to your 8th graders to give them a head start, or it could be to offer a CTE prep opportunity to whet their appetite. What most districts are doing already is looking at data on current 8th graders and proactively identifying students who might struggle in 9th grade. Summer is a great time to offer these students an opportunity to get a fresh start, learn the ropes, and come into ninth grade with a positive attitude. It's also a great time to offer supports to your current ninth graders who haven't earned at least 6 credits. Our advice is never waste a good summer. And for next school year, it's fair to ask, how will things look different when it comes to student success? What supports will be in place in your district to support students who are struggling? Will you offer ninth grade academies, a new counselor or social worker, a new program to track absent students and reach out to them, a new AVID program? How will students access higher level classes? Are you adding sections of new AP and IB classes? Are students able to take dual credit courses at your high school or your community college? And what new CT opportunities are you offering? Are these courses causing students to be excited to come to school every day? Are you offering courses in fields where students can earn a certification? Are you exposing students to high demand, high wage fields of study? Measure 98 offers you new funds to better support students' graduation ready for college and career. As school board members, you have the opportunity to weigh in and shape the direction that your district takes. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Parasa to talk about different resources that will be available to you as you go forward.
Thank you, Bobbie. To support you in local implementation, we launched the Oregon Center for High School Success last summer. It's a free resource. We're partnering with the University of Chicago to provide technical support to districts, and this will be in collaboration with different state and regional partners. Right now, we are partnering with 7 school districts: Centennial, Eugene, Hillsborough, Reynolds, Tigard-Tualatin, St. Helens, and Medford. And these school districts have also offered to be a host partner for neighboring districts interested in receiving more training, particularly around freshman success. Here's a map of where we're planning to expand over this next year. And our first training will begin in May of this year, and we'll also follow up with some more information about that over email. So in summary, here's how we can help. We'd love to be a thought partner for you as you put together your multi-year plans. We can also help to connect you to other school board members and district leaders, as well as providing training and guidance. In the past, we've presented at OSBA conferences, at different COSA convenings. We've also been invited to speak to some superintendents and at different school board meetings. So if we can be helpful in any way, please reach out. We also have a really great team, and I wanted to make sure that you saw everyone so you can put a face to the name. And our team is growing. Right now, we're also hiring for freshman success coaches. So if you have any recommendations on who might be a good fit, please reach out to me. And last, I wanted to close out by showing all the different resources that you'll have at your fingertips. We provided a snapshot planning calendar at the end of the slide deck, as well as different tips for ESD board members. And at the end there, under the Center for High School Success, I've also included our website. I've also included some information from the Department of Education. So Mary May is going to be a key point of contact, and she can help direct you to the right people. And we've also included the equity decision-making tool on the reference slides, as well as a peer reviewer opportunity. Right now, the department is in the process of recruiting peer reviewers to help look at the multi-year plans. There'll be a short training via webinar that folks would need to participate on, and they'll have a few weeks to review 2 to 3 plans. And it's a great opportunity to learn from other districts and figure out what you can borrow and share as well. And it's a great professional learning opportunity. And at the very end right there, we've also included a website to the department's high school success page. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We really appreciate everyone for joining the call. If we weren't able to get to your question today, please feel free to email Bobbie or myself. Our email is listed at the end of the presentation on the resources page. Again, thank you so much for joining us on your lunch hour. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.